thank you to the Crawford Fund for this opportunity to speak to you. First of all, I'd really like everybody to just take a moment and try to imagine a world without hunger and without malnutrition. And then imagine that the food that made that possible was produced and distributed in sustainable and resilient ways. So I call this universal food security. Now, why universal? First of all, it's important to remember that food security, food is a human right, embodied in the UN Declaration on Human Rights in 1948 and further elaborated in 1966. So it is a human right for everybody. In 1996, the UN Food Summit declared that food security was access to adequate, safe, and nutritious food for all people at all times. And in 2015, with the Sustainable Development Goals, we declared we would end hunger and that no one would be left behind. So universal food security, a world where every person enjoys a healthy diet derived from sustainable and resilient food systems. So how are we doing? So to begin with, we've heard this a few times today and yesterday. 673 million people are going hungry, 1 in 12. 150 million children under the age of 5 are stunted, short for their age, reflecting chronic malnutrition. 43 million children under the age of 5 are wasted. More than 2 billion people on the planet suffer from various forms of 2 billion people suffer from various forms of micronutrient deficiencies. 2.5 to 3 billion people are overweight, a third of them obese. 2.6 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet. So we put all this together with recognizing there are overlaps. Around half of the world's population, they're not consuming a healthy diet. So one of the reasons for this has been, over time, the increase in food prices. Food prices clearly affect what we eat. This FAO index, which has been tracked since 1960, indicates the current level is 130. This is an index of different commodities that are important for food security. Discounted. These are real costs, real prices. It's about 60% higher than it was in around 2006, before we had these sharp increases associated with the global financial crisis. And it's pretty much stayed with us. We've had peaks, of course. We've had peaks as a result of COVID. We have a continuing ongoing war in Russia and Ukraine, but we're still 60% above where we were. So I think that message is actually finally getting across. The Asian Development Bank in our region has committed to invest $40 billion by 2030 on food security. And they have a very good ear for the needs and interests of their member countries, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. Indonesia recently kicked off a meal program, a school meal program. They're going to reach 83 million children through this program. I haven't seen this much action on food security in Indonesia since the days of the Green Revolution. It's a very big commitment, led from the very top. And in the Pacific, which was clearly badly affected by trade disruptions as a result of COVID, has come around to identifying the need and the priority of food security, focusing on healthy, regenerative, and secure systems, sustainable livelihoods, and building resilience for future generations. So make no mistake, the alarm bells are ringing, and certainly our neighbors are hearing this. Xi Jinping described agriculture in December 2022. He described agriculture as a national security issue of extreme importance. ASEAN leaders have made their declarations on food security. Brazil has launched through the G20 a global alliance against hunger and poverty. 102 countries, including Australia, have signed up for this. COP28 and coming up COP30 will really focus on the nexus of food and climate. And the recent UN Food Security Summit again reinforced the importance of accelerated action to transform the world's food systems. So it's not just about the availability of the food. We also need to understand, and I think most people in this room do, that food security comes at a cost. It comes at a cost to the environment. We can think about humans as invasive species. There's 8.2 billion of us now. 10,000 years ago, there were 10 million people on the planet, right? So the footprint is clear for all: deforestation, land degradation, extraction of water, unsustainable extraction of water, pollution, biodiversity loss at unprecedented levels, and greenhouse gas emissions. 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions come from the food system, not just agriculture. Agriculture is about half of that, but from the totality of the food system. So food systems are clearly casualties and contributors to climate change, right? There's no doubt about that. The evidence is very clear, which requires a twofold response. Adaptation, which is something farmers know only too well. They have to adapt to survive. And mitigation, which is something new, because farmers will not necessarily directly see the benefits of their investments in mitigation. So that has implications on how such programs are rolled out. So the context, like placing the context of this event, food systems are failing to deliver on universal food security. Food systems clearly have to adapt to this adversely changing climate. Basically, we have to reduce the overall footprint of our food systems. And frankly, we need to be listening to our regional neighbours. They're seeking solutions. They're asking for support. They're looking for technologies, policies, and institutions to help them make this food system transformation. So I've spent the last 10 years really focusing hard on this. And 2 years ago, came out with this book that was mentioned, looking for best practice. The UN said they wanted to end hunger, and I was really struggling with it. How do you actually end hunger? Considering where we are today, those numbers. So I searched hard in the literature. I sought expert opinion. I drew on my own 40 years or so of working in this area. And I drew the conclusion, look, science, context, needs, and rights, and not ideology, are what should shape our decisions on policies and practices. And I was guided by that in identifying 5 big investment areas that I've synthesized as most important. Briefly, sustainable intensification, more food with reduced environmental footprint, reducing post-harvest losses, post-harvest stewardship. We waste or lose 1/3 of the food we produce. Connecting farmers to markets. What's the use of more food if we cannot connect our food to the consumers? Shifting our diets in a healthy way. And finally, for those who are not able to manage or secure the healthy food that they need, their social protection system. So we need to put all these together in an integrated, coherent, and context-driven way. All of this underpinned by good governance, women's empowerment, broader investments in education and health. I'll just focus for a couple of minutes on sustainable intensification, which I think is of interest to many of you in the room. So the way I look at it, it doesn't mean going around the world intensifying every plot of land. That makes no sense at all, and in fact can be actually dangerous for food security. But I see it really as a process in aggregate. The idea that there are parts of the world where we need to significantly increase output on existing farms. In other parts, we should try to maintain the levels of production that we have, but improve productivity, reducing the environmental footprint. We need to restore abandoned and unproductive lands where possible. We need to abandon annual cropping in the most degraded lands. And we really have to go out and make sure that we protect the remaining natural ecosystems that we have. The net result, and I heard the word net mentioned a few times yesterday, the net result is more food and a reduced environmental impact. So when it comes to, just very briefly, the greenhouse gas emissions, I'm really talking about focusing here through sustainable intensification. We can really have an impact on emissions from land use change. We can really cut that back greatly. We can also, of course, through innovations that you're going to hear today, we're going to be able to work on reducing emissions with existing agricultural production systems. So, look, the key conclusions that I made through this work, firstly, universal food security is absolutely achievable, the way I described it. But it does require an integrated, cross-sectoral, multi-institutional, multi-level, by multi-level, global, national, local approach. The point is we can't just produce our way out of this crisis. It has to be a much more holistic approach. Some of our current institutions are not fit for purpose, and frankly, we are still underinvesting in research. The CGIAR, I was a part of that for 24 years. These are the actual expenditures over the last 12 years or so. It's pretty much flat, and it's less than $1 billion. Pepsi and Coca-Cola spend $8 billion a year on marketing. I mean, this is what we're up against. So investing at such a low level, less than $1 billion, there's a vision to increase it to $2 billion. Does this look like it's heading towards $2 billion? I don't think so. Grossly inadequate. So the question that I heard this morning and I'm asking is, is Australia able to grasp this opportunity to lead? I think the answer is yes. We have a historical track record of improving agricultural productivity in some of the most hostile environments in the world. We've got decades of experience in development assistance, working on agriculture and food security across the Asia-Pacific region. I've worked in many of those projects myself. We've got world-class universities, research institutions undertaking education, research, outreach programs in this area. And ACR, actually, has been mentioned this morning, presents really a unique model of partnership for getting this work done. So, looking at the numbers, this is DFAT, ODA, from their own website. Agriculture gets about 8% of DFAT's budget. I mean, in terms of focusing on agriculture as part of our development assistance approach. Universities. These are the different ways in which ODA is delivered. Universities attract 4.5% of the ODA budget from Australia. It's very small. It seems to me to be very small, and there's some great advantages of universities. Their longevity, their ability to continue programs, as Dr. Sadiq just mentioned. That is very powerful. Are we really utilizing universities to the extent that we should? ACR, budget less than $120 million. Australian dollars, right? This is tiny. This is minuscule. They do a wonderful, wonderful job. But surely the problems that I've been talking about deserve more than this. And I would argue for scaling that up. So here are my actionable recommendations, which I was asked to give. Firstly, I think we should really advance Australia as the go-to regional leader on food security. The reputation is there, the opportunity is there, the credibility is there. We do need to do more. And that includes increasing the profile, the priority of agriculture and food security within our ODA portfolio. Australia should actively support the G20 Global Alliance on ending against hunger and poverty. Now this is an alliance that, yes, more declarations and all of that, but they're really focusing at the country level. And I think Australia could do a lot, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. Expanding, enhancing partnerships, particularly with multilateral development banks like the ADB, $40 billion. Partnerships between ACR and some of these implementing organizations, I think, could be very productive. University-to-university cooperation could be expanded. I got my start through something called the Australian Asian Universities Cooperation Scheme, working in Bali in the 70s. So having another look at that AAUCS model, could we be doing more in terms of university-to-university cooperation in the region? And finally, stepping up support to this great organization, the Crawford Fund. Really, there is no organization like it in the world. I've seen nothing like the Crawford Fund. A great role, it could do much more. My final slide, last week I should say, it was the centenary of the birth of Professor M.S. Swaminathan, who gave the Crawford Lecture in 1990. Rereading that lecture, I saw many of the points that we're talking about today were covered in that lecture. He was a great visionary. Something he wrote in 2012 and published in Science I thought was relevant to today. If synergy can be created among scientific know-how, political do-how, and farmer participation, it should be possible to achieve the goal of overcoming chronic and hidden hunger. I think those words really resonate with the mission of all of you in the room today. Thank you very much.